Hello everyone. This is the connectivity group. We have 6 members. James, Melbourne Office Sustainability. Claire, Bridge Engineer Campus Office. And Matek, New York Office Management System. And Nick, Singapore Office Acoustic. Pat from the Madrid Office Master Planning. And I'm Michelle, the HR from Shenzhen Office. And our group study is an investigation into public bicycle hire schemes and the opportunities for Arab. And the public bicycle hire scheme are being promoted in many cities. The number of cities has risen from less than 10 in 2000 to more than 350 by 2010. Nearly 250,000 bicycles available for hire through these schemes. They have many possible connectivity and sustainability advantages, potentially impact on congestion, health, and environment. The purpose of this study is to understand the successful schemes and identify the business opportunities for Arab. For the methods, we select the 12 cities around the world where the schemes is either already up and running or had been introduced and then abandoned. For this, we look at the main features and the reasons why some schemes just failed. And to obtain first-hand information, we interviewed some scheme operators in some cities and conduct a survey for bicycle users group. And we also did the literature review, including policy paper, policy analysis that have prepared for promoting the schemes, and the menus developed by the successful group of practitioners. Our team members will introduce more details.
So one of the first tasks that we undertook at the beginning in the preparatory phase for the research was creating a framework within which we looked at 12 selected schemes that ranged in size. Some of them were successful and are about to become profitable. Some of them were abandoned soon after they were started. And we looked at the features of the schemes. We looked at the context in which they existed, economic and social context. We looked at the legal frameworks. We looked at financial support and ownership structure. And the purpose of it was to find commonalities, common threads in terms of typical challenges that the municipalities and the schemes face. We looked at success factors and reasons why those who were abandoned were not successful. And we, based on that framework research, we ended up with a few conclusions, pointing us to most significant, most important considerations that planners of such schemes should have in mind. And among them, we saw such considerations as topography, potential problems with vandalism and theft. We looked at the cost of the schemes to the users and how easy it was for the users to submit payments for using the schemes. We looked at how public sector and private organizations were contributing in the financing of the schemes, both in the planning and implementation and establishing phase as well as in the operation phase. We also looked at challenges, and one of the common challenges was rebalancing of stations, moving bicycles from one part of the city to another as a result of different commuting patterns, but also of gravity. In some places, bicycles would end up in the bottom of the hills and had to be moved to the top of them.
Thank you. So after we had found out some of these bits of information, we developed a survey to gather information from current users or potential users of these schemes. So the survey was circulated mainly within Arab, and it was put on the internet homepage so everyone had access to it. But we also focused on some of the forums, so it went on the bicycle users group, the SUSNet, and the transport consultancy. Transport consultancy. We got a very good response to that. We were very pleased. Over 500 people responded to this survey, and that meant that we had gained responses from over 140 cities, so quite a wide coverage there. The questions we asked in the survey were things such as, do you use these systems? Why do you use them? What aspects of the systems do you like? What don't you like? We asked people to suggest improvements that could be made to them. And we also asked for people who didn't use them, why not? What were their reasons for not using them? And so from this, we collated the results, and we found, I won't go through all of them now, but a few things we found out. We found out that the majority of people were doing journeys which were less than 4 kilometres. In general, people were happy with the costs, it didn't feel too expensive to. But one of the problems which came out is quite a lot of people responded to say that there were often insufficient bikes. They went to hire a bike and there wasn't one in the rack, or when they wanted to return it, the rack was full. So the improvements they suggested were things such as, unsurprisingly, more bikes, more docking stations, and also things like improving the infrastructure, cycling infrastructure within the city, such as cycle lanes, separated routes, that sort of thing. We also asked about if people had ever used these schemes as a tourist in a city, and we got an overwhelming response from that to say, for the people who'd used it, they said something like 98% of them said it had a positive effect, a positive influence on their sightseeing experience. So that was one good, quite a positive result from that. And we also heard from a number of people responded to say that there wasn't a scheme in the city which they lived in, but they would, if there was, they would use it, and they'd be very keen to see one introduced.
So having talked to the users, we felt we ought to get a perspective about bicycle schemes from the operators. We decided to do this rather than as a questionnaire. We did it by interview, and we developed a fairly short series of questions that we were going to put to various system operators. Being very geographically spread, we were able to do quite a good spread of interviews. We managed Europe, US, Australia and China to talk to people. And we concentrated our questions on issues such as finance, operations, safety and people's plans for the future. Finance was very interesting. The schemes all needed finance to get them started, but it was interesting to find out that some of the schemes are expecting to be self-financing in the relatively near future, although of course they do need income from sponsorship. On the operations side, there are some very common issues. We've already mentioned the unavoidable effect of gravity and the problems with migration of bicycles from the outside of the city to the centre during the course of a day. There are a few other things that came up from the operators regarding theft, which is one of the reasons why some of the schemes had failed, was ways of dealing with theft. Safety was obviously right at the top of a lot of people's agendas, and this is a lot of concern had been expressed about how safety would impact on the schemes. Everybody we spoke to said it actually proved not to be a problem, that very few of them could identify a single significant accident that had happened to one of their users on a bicycle. This was a very interesting answer for us because we were very intrigued by the potential benefit of cycling as a health benefit and weighing that up against the potential lack of health benefit of being run over by a bus. On the face of it, it would seem that the balance is very much in favour of having these schemes, but of course the way you lay out the city and the way you organise the cycling lanes and schemes is a key part of that. On the future, the good news is that there are a lot of people out there with a very successful scheme who want to expand it, and we think that's very good news for Arup. Potentially this is an area where we could offer a wide range of services to people to help them expand those schemes in the most effective way.
Okay, so we took the findings from the framework assessment, the year surveys, the scheme operator interviews, and also quite an extensive literature review. And we analysed those different studies to come up with a series of trends that were elements of successful bicycle schemes. So we could then flip that into opportunities for Arup, which Paz will talk about in a moment. Some of the trends were obvious, some are not, but I'm here to talk you through a couple of the ones that were more generally common across successful bicycle schemes. We tried to look at the successful elements of bicycle schemes through the prism of what a scheme operator, who might be our client, could control, or what they could potentially try and influence. That might be contextual. Things that an operator can control that were elements of successful schemes were often to do with fee and payment structures. So was there a portion of the time for the hire period which would be free? It might be 30 minutes or something, just to get people into the system and using the system for short journeys in particular. An appropriate joining fee as well, something that wasn't too high or low, something that was appropriate for the particular income levels of the area, perhaps. Similarly, deposits for per use had to be appropriate and reflect the value of the bike and also income levels around the area. The use of credit cards and prepaid cards was quite important as well, rather than cash. One thing that was touched on before was trying to get the bikes from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill, the tidal flows, making sure successful schemes made sure that they had appropriate balance. So enough bikes and enough empty spaces at docking stations. That was very, very important. And similarly, we found that schemes that modelled demand fluctuations throughout the year were relatively more successful, particularly to do with weather. So rather than just saying demand is flat, pretty obvious, isn't it, that you just say, well, demand is higher in certain parts of the year than others. And that would directly influence the sustainability of the commercial business case as well. Other elements of the successful schemes which potentially an operator could influence and we could advise were regarding just mode separation, quite simply. So where there was better mode separation, it was more successful. Where there was better integration at the end of the bicycle journey to public transport for the next step of the journey, that was obviously a measure of success as well. And signage, so pretty obvious things. One element that was perhaps not under control of the bicycle scheme operators or Arup even was topography. So the flatter the area, obviously the more successful the bicycle schemes.
It's pretty clear for us that cities and connectivity are two items that are very important within the work that Arup does. We think that the expansion of these systems all over the world it's actually a good opportunity for us. Although Arup has little direct experience in these PBS systems, the existing capabilities we have currently cover all the areas related to this field. We have extensive experience in advising local authorities and municipalities, promoting cycling and planning networks for cycling. And also we have experience in the design of all the related infrastructures. We think that this group of capabilities can be combined to offer a new package of services, and we can become industry experts in this field. One of the recommendations we are including in our report is to identify our potential competitors who are now the experts in this area. We have identified a group of main opportunities we think we can have in this business. First one is working with the scheme operators in the same way we advised the local authorities. It can be in planning side or designing systems. We can have opportunities working on the existing infrastructure. If some retrofit is required in the infrastructure, such as improvements and junctions or segregated routes, And also we have to keep in mind that many of these schemes are going to be enlarged in the next few years. Also, we have opportunities in developing countries. These systems can be the solution for the congestion in the megacities of the future, and they are cheap and easy systems of transport. We can find work collaborating with banks to implement these systems in these developing countries. We have identified also the groups in ARC that can be interested in this work. Obviously, transport planning and master planning, sustainability, project management, security and transaction advice. And we are now in the process of identifying also the right people to address this study. So most of all of this information in detail will be available shortly in our report. And now we are happy to receive your feedback and answer your questions.
Hi, thank you. That was really good. That was a really good presentation. I appreciate it. One of the things that I'm trying to think of the connections with all three presentations and how they all relate and talk to, obviously in terms of the first two presentations, you know, the cities are one of the clients that you can talk to, and then obviously the thing that I would ask is what's the difference between sustainability and resilience? Is a city that's resilient also sustainable? And then off the back of this presentation is this a type of sustainability that we should be striving for some of our cities and transport planning and transport network? So I think all three of them are pretty strong linkages and really good. Specifically for this presentation, I would say that one of the opportunities that I would be looking at is obviously with cities, and we are working on a few projects that are looking at cycling and transport. So it would be interesting to see, the cities that I'm working with are interested in seeing where are the best cycling transport practices and how it's integrated into the broader transport plan, and what are the KPIs that are connected. You know, are there any drivers that would make them want to do this kind of low cost practice? I know, for example, Copenhagen has a 40% cycling already, and they're going to increase their cycling. So for cities that already have a strong cycling habit in place, would this rental scheme still be applicable for them, et cetera, et cetera? So I would think that's really interesting, and would be interested in your report.
Conversely, the Copenhagen one, when we spoke to the guys who run, because they were one of the people we interviewed, they did say that actually the scheme isn't very successful for the local citizens of Copenhagen because they've already all got bikes, and they prefer their nice fast bikes to the very slow bikes that are in the scheme. But the scheme has been very successful for tourists. There are other cities where, I think London, Robert, you came in on bicycle today, didn't you?
I couldn't find one on the racket.
Oh, right. But they are, there's obviously a need here in London, and Paris has been phenomenally successful as a scheme.
So which schemes do you think are the best in all the cities? You know, your top 2, 3.
You'll have to wait till we get to I've got to write the conclusion of our report next week, so the week after next.
Sorry, Curtis, Ian Gardner. I just wondered the degree to which you looked at the, you've obviously looked a lot at the mechanics of the schemes and the way the schemes have been presented. The degree to which you've looked at the characteristics of cities, you mentioned topography, but the characteristics of city, whether it's population mix, scale, climate, whether there's a minimum size city which you need to get to for this sort of scheme to work in. So if we're advocating and helping city planning, we know which sort of cities it makes sense to address this in, and which sort of cities, frankly, it's an uphill struggle, it won't work. When we're planning major new urban structures in the Middle East or in in Russia, which of those are ones where we should say this is absolutely on the agenda, and which are the ones we should say, well, it's actually not going to be on the agenda, it won't work? Because that would be a really useful bit of input to us to take to new clients. And another just passing thought is for all three presentations, it would be really interesting to know which of the cities that are addressing these issues, quality of life is a big tick. You know, because living in cities is all about, cities work if the quality of life and there's a buzz and the right thing. And I think all three of these themes can contribute a lot to being able to identify that they help quality of life. Thanks.
To answer the scale of the city question, part of that question, these schemes do come in all shapes and sizes. The London scheme is more the Rolls-Royce scheme, I'm not mixing my metaphors there. We also interviewed a scheme I interviewed a scheme which is being run in Newcastle, which is just starting up, and it just has a handful of docking stations, and it's very low cost. It works by, you send a text message to the operators, and they send you back the combination for the combination lock that's on the bike. It's as simple as that. And then you just have to, and then you have, at the end of your journey, you've got to text them back to tell them where you've left it.
And I'm thinking cities like Hong Kong, one walks through buildings. Cities like a lot of continental cities in Europe, one walks around buildings. I just wonder whether there are different types of characteristic of cities that influence the way people move and influence whether bikes work or don't work. But I'm not saying I want an answer. I'm just very interested in being able to read the sort of things you're doing and seeing whether it addresses these issues.
There are also, we noticed that the schemes aim to do different things. Some schemes, which, particularly in cities which have good transport networks, they're using it for the last mile of the journey, so to get from the train station to the office. Other schemes, they're used for the entire journey.
Yeah.
We also try to look at economic and societal layer of things, because the two unsuccessful schemes, Cambridge and Portland, Oregon, were unsuccessful because of vandalism and theft. So we're trying to find some correlation between that and economic.
I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much for keeping to time.